In Hell Let Loose, Vietnam, survival depends on more than just good aim. The jungle, tunnels, and ambushes demand strategy, communication, and constant awareness. In this video, you will check out 10 advanced tips to fight better, avoid common mistakes, and help your team dominate the battlefield. American supply helicopters look like a perfect solution to keep the team's advance going, but in practice, they are huge and extremely vulnerable targets. Therefore, my recommendation is simple. Never treat the Huey like a fighter jet. It must come in, drop the cargo, and leave before heavy machine guns or anti-aircraft fire have time to react. The pilot needs to plan the route along the edges of the map, using trees and terrain to conceal the aircraft during flight. This approach significantly reduces exposure to the most obvious corridors and avoids crossing enemy-controlled areas directly. Flying low helps, but it does not mean flying recklessly. A tree, a hill, or a sudden change in altitude can be just as dangerous as a burst of machine gun fire. Coordination between the pilot and the logistics officer also makes all the difference. Even before taking off, both need to define the drop zone and confirm whether that area genuinely contributes to the team's next advance. The logistics officer must take the co-pilot seat to perform the supply drop, while the pilot keeps the aircraft moving and avoids hovering over a contested zone. In my experience, the biggest mistake is trying to make a perfect drop right in the middle of the battle, remaining stationary over the objective for too long. It is better to release supplies in a slightly more distant but safe area than to lose the entire helicopter because of a risky position. Think of the flight as a rapid operation. Skirt the map, use natural cover, make the drop, and vanish before the enemy can turn the sky into a trap. In this game, spawn points win matches just as much as weapons. A garrison can bring the entire team back, the outpost keeps the squad close to the action, and tunnels create an infiltration network for the NVA. Without these points, every death turns into a long walk from base to combat. For this reason, I always look at the map immediately after dying. If there is a contested point, do not automatically choose the safest or most distant spawn. Wait for a coordinated wave and respawn with other players to increase pressure. A garrison costs 50 supplies in friendly territory and 100 in enemy territory. There can be up to 8 per team, and they must respect the minimum distance between them, so each placement must have a clear purpose. The ideal approach is to maintain a combination of spawns, one more protected to guarantee defense, another close enough to sustain the attack, and a third on a flank to create an angle. The outpost serves the squad, while the garrison allows multiple groups to appear together. On the NVA side, tunnels can connect different routes and keep the offensive unpredictable. A team without advanced spawns is not really attacking, it is just running back to the battle. Protect garrisons, replace outposts when the line advances, and do not respawn individually without looking at the map. When everyone enters the same point at the right moment, a contested position can turn into a real offensive in a few seconds. On river maps, patrol boats can be much more than simple transport vehicles. I like to think of them as mobile heavy machine guns. You use the river to reach an unexpected bank, keep the boat in a position that covers the beach, and start pressing the defenders as your infantry approaches. The game was specifically designed to turn the extensive river network into attack, transport, and combat routes. The most important part is not disembarking everyone immediately. Leave the gunner working the banks, suppressing windows, bushes, and positions where enemies are likely to be waiting. Meanwhile, some soldiers can swim from a less obvious angle or advance along the beach under the cover of the boat's fire. In my experience, this kind of split pressure tends to be much more efficient than having the entire squad show up at the same point and become an easy target. The detail that makes this tactic truly strong is cutting the engine when you find a safe position. At that moment, the boat can function as an advanced spawn point, in addition to continuing to serve as a fire platform. It is almost like turning a vehicle into a small floating base. The infantry can quickly return to combat, while the gunner keeps the bank under control. Just do not leave the boat exposed in the middle of the river, because the banks are full of angles for ambushes and anti-armor weapons. But remember, the boat must not fight alone. The driver needs to choose bends, vegetation, and narrow stretches that reduce the number of enemy positions capable of firing at you. The ideal approach is to coordinate the advance with the squad leader, so the crew knows exactly which bank to suppress and where the infantry will enter. When this coordination works, the river stops being just a barrier on the map and turns into a silent invasion route, a line of fire and a spawn point all at once. In the middle of the jungle, you often only see a shadow, a moving branch, or an almost imperceptible flash. At those moments, I prefer to treat any suspicious movement as a real threat, especially when using an M60 or an RPD. The idea is not simply to waste ammunition by shooting in every direction. The secret is to control the fire and cover areas where the enemy is likely hiding. The edge of a bush, an elevation, a gap between trees, or the path toward an objective. Even without visual confirmation, a well-placed burst can force the adversary to keep their head down, lose vision, and halt their advance. That is when the suppression effect becomes more important than kills. When the enemy is under constant fire, they struggle to aim, observe your team's movement, and respond with precision. I like to use this pressure to create a window of opportunity. While the machine gun keeps the foliage in check, riflemen can advance, flank, or reach a safer position. Just do not turn the tactic into a purposeless discharge. Monitor ammunition consumption, take short pauses to correct the direction of fire, and communicate to the squad which areas are being suppressed. In the jungle, you do not always need to see the enemy to defeat them. Sometimes, it is enough to make every shadow dangerous enough that they cannot raise their head. NVA tunnels can completely change the rhythm of a match, but the biggest mistake is placing them practically on top of the main objective. I prefer to think of them as a network of alternative routes, not as a respawn point for a single attack. When the tunnel is too close to the hard cap, it becomes predictable and is usually found and destroyed quickly. The best position is usually on the sides of neighboring sectors, in areas protected by vegetation, elevations, or scarcely observed paths. That way, your squad can respawn outside the enemy's direct line of sight and attack from different angles. The goal is not to reach the center of the fight immediately, but to create a constant threat on the flanks. This approach also makes adversary defense much more difficult. If the enemy concentrates troops on the objective, you can press from one side. If they move soldiers to hunt the tunnel, it opens space for the main attack. Since these tunnels function as hidden and mobile respawn points, they allow you to maintain this pressure without relying on the traditional supply cost, although distance limits and cooldown times must still be respected. In my opinion, a good tunnel is almost never the closest one to the objective. It is the one that keeps working after the first attack fails and forces the adversary to look backward. Spread the network across the sides, vary the approach angles, and avoid repeating the same path. Thus, the tunnel stops being just a spawn and becomes the center of an unpredictable offensive. The Mortar Squad is one of the roles that depends most on communication, and in my opinion, it only reaches its full potential when the spotter, the support, and the gunner work as a single team. Without this coordination, shots can land far from the target, arrive too late, or even hinder the advance of friendly forces. The spotter needs to act a few steps ahead, observing enemy positions and marking static targets on the tactical map. Instead of looking only for eliminations, I would use mortars to hit trenches, defense points, machine gun positions, and areas where the enemy is gathering. A precise mark is worth more than several vague requests to shoot at that place. Meanwhile, the gunner must turn this information into concrete distance and angle adjustments. In rice paddies and open areas where cover is scarce, a well-synchronized salvo can completely disrupt the defense before the main squad crosses the terrain. The ideal approach is to start the bombardment before the advance, maintain pressure during the approach, and stop firing when allies are too close. For me, the secret lies in treating the mortar as part of the attack, rather than as an isolated unit behind the lines. The spotter reports what is happening, the gunner corrects the shots, and the rest of the squad confirms the results and updates targets. When this triangulation works, the enemy has no time to react. First, they lose position, then they lose cover, and finally they lose control of the sector. Dragging wounded comrades is one of the most important mechanics to keep the advance alive. When someone falls out in the open, running directly to them to revive them usually turns the medic into another target. I prefer to create a small safety window, throw smoke, approach low, and pull the soldier behind a tree, a ditch, or any nearby cover. The detail that makes all the difference is understanding that the revival does not need to start right where the ally fell. Any soldier can drag a wounded comrade, while the medic can take over the rescue and, depending on their equipment, still use a pistol while moving. This allows you to pull the victim out of the line of fire before starting the medical procedure. Smoke must be used to block the enemy's vision, not simply thrown on top of the fallen soldier. I would try to place it between the enemy position and the rescue route, creating a curtain to advance and retreat. As soon as the ally is protected, the medic can revive them much more safely. After that, it is still important to apply the necessary bandage before leaving the location. But not every rescue is worth an extra life. Before dragging someone, Check if the area is being covered by machine guns, snipers, or explosives. A good medic does not run into danger on reflex. They pick the moment, use smoke, save the comrade, and keep the whole team moving forward. In the end, this mechanic turns a fall that would normally end the attack into an opportunity to preserve the squad and keep pressing. Swimming turns rivers into flank routes, but not safe paths. Crossing through water can surprise the enemy, especially because the maps feature river networks connecting distant areas, but you are much more exposed during the journey. The biggest problem is that, while swimming, you cannot react as you would on solid ground. Your weapon is not ready for an immediate confrontation, and any machine gun or sniper hidden on the bank can turn the crossing into a disaster. I would only make this move after observing the map and confirming the opposite bank is not being watched. Smoke is essential for crossing open stretches. The ideal approach is to create a curtain between yourself and enemy positions, advance as a group, and, whenever possible, count on a friendly boat suppressing the bank. The boat can pressure defenders and draw attention to another point, while infantry uses the water to appear at an unexpected angle. Also, do not dive for too long just to look stealthy. You still need to manage your breath and know when to surface. Otherwise, you might die before even reaching the other side. For me, swimming works best as part of a coordinated attack. Smoke to hide, boat to cover, and soldiers ready to occupy the bank as soon as they arrive. In Conquest mode, every respawn weighs on the team's morale meter, while controlling fewer objectives also accelerates this loss. Therefore, I would not treat a death as something isolated. When the team is behind on the map, a sequence of respawns can turn a difficult situation into an inevitable defeat. If you are losing most points, the best move is to slow down and play to survive. Instead of sending everyone to respawn at the same time for a desperate attempt, maintain defensive positions, protect access routes, and wait for a genuine opportunity to retake an objective. The priority shifts from advancing at all costs to stopping morale from continuing to plummet. This is why the medic gains enormous value in this mode. A revived ally prevents the team from paying the cost of a new respawn, so protecting medics and creating conditions for them to work can make a huge difference in the outcome. Smoke, cover, and communication are worth more than a solitary dash to the point, especially when every casualty feeds the team's shared resource. In my opinion, Conquest punishes autopilot. If the attack fails, do not keep respawning just to die in the same corridor. Fall back, reorganize squads, and fortify the sector that is still under control. Sometimes, the most aggressive play is simply not handing another life to the enemy until the team can stabilize the line and set up a coordinated counterattack. Communication is not an extra detail. It is the framework that keeps the team functioning. Proximity, squad, and command channels have different functions, and knowing how to switch between them prevents important information from getting lost in the middle of chaos. The squad leader needs to turn this communication into action. Position outposts, mark enemies, and report when an adversary tunnel, helicopter, or garrison is found. I like to make short and specific calls, indicating direction, approximate distance, and threat type. A warning like, enemy garrison 100 meters north behind the tree line, helps much more than simply saying, there's an enemy here. On the command channel, leaders can coordinate attacks, defenses, and resource requests with the commander. While the squad leader organizes combat on the ground, the commander manages manpower, munitions, and fuel, calls in strikes, and uses supply helicopters to keep the logistics network active. These decisions directly affect spawns, vehicles, and fire support. For me, the biggest advantage comes not from talking the whole time, but from listening and transmitting only what changes the team's decision. A player who listens might realize the flank is open, a garrison has been destroyed, or an attack is about to happen. Without a microphone, attention to channels, and map markers, the team ends up fighting as separate groups. With an active command chain, each squad becomes part of the same plan.